People have long suspected that I'm allergic to the Apple iPhone, and as proof of this, my review of this, the iPhone 8 Plus, has been plagued by me being incredibly poorly, and you can probably tell in my voice and my appearance, but the show must go on. So, back in 2007, the Apple iPhone was a triumph of futuristic user interface over actual functionality, but year on year, the iPhone has caught up and largely surpassed the competition. In the early days, Symbian-based Nokia's, latterly Android-based flagships from a dozen manufacturers. And the iPhone 8 Plus here, in terms of imaging, internals, fit and finish, knocks just about everything else into a cocked hat, at least until the iPhone 10 is available in a month or two, but that comes with its own caveats. In fact, there are caveats here, which I'll come to below, but the existing iPhone 7 Plus was already one of the most feature-packed bits of consumer hardware ever made, and the 8 Plus improves on this in every area for only a small price hike. The most striking thing about the iPhone Plus designs is their size. The bezels, both top and bottom, are larger than is trendy now. Now, this is late 2017, and most of the smartphone flagships have had minimal bezels for at least a year, giving more screen real estate without making the phone itself larger. And this is, of course, where the iPhone 10 comes in, level hate the notch, while the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus are stuck with a design from arguably 2012. Materials have been swapped out, though. Apple has dropped the iPhone's scratchable aluminium backs and gone back to Gorilla Glass, in theory less prone to scratches, but obviously at greater risk from shattering if dropped onto the pavement. The iPhone 8 Plus is also heavier as a result, but reassuringly so, and the feel in the hand is terrific if you can handle the overall size. I still recommend a TPU case though, just in case. The biggest benefit of the glass back is that Apple can get cracking with the final part of its no ports master plan. Having eliminated the 3.5mm jack in the 7 range, controversially, it does seem as though future iPhones wouldn't have a charging port either. Charging will instead be wireless, and the iPhone 8 range kicks this off with a Qi-compatible coil underneath the glass in the centre here. Regardless of what you think of their master plan, credit to Apple for sticking with the industry standard here rather than inventing their own magical version. I tested the iPhone 8 Plus with some standard charging pads and it worked just fine. Of course, Qi wireless charging isn't as fast as wired charging over the Lightning cable, but the use case is very different. Every single time you put your phone down, there's no reason why it can't go on top of a Qi pad, meaning that in theory your phone will spend a lot of its life at or near 100%, solving the, quote, battery problem once and for all, and without any of those pesky wires or connectors. In theory, anyway, once users have multiple Qi pads around their home and office, and once pads are in travel hubs and coffee shops. The Lightning port is still around on the iPhone 8 range anyway, ditto the iPhone 10, but I'll bet it's history for the iPhone 11 in autumn 2018, meaning also that all headphone output will also be wireless, since the current Lightning headphones supplied here in the box, along with a Lightning to 3.5mm adapter for hooking up legacy headphones, the Lightning headphones will also be outdated. As Sir Humphrey from Yes Minister would say, a set of courageous decisions. The impressive spec bump for the iPhone 8 Plus is the proprietary A11 Bionic chipset, flexing its 6-core muscle in terms of speeding the user interface and applications between 25% and 75% faster than the iPhone 7 Plus, depending on what you're doing and how many cores are needed. Plus, of course, imaging, which is very good, and I'll come to that in a moment. What the user sees on the surface is very familiar though, a 5.5-inch 1080p 16:9 LCD display that's as crisp and impressive as ever. In fact, it's better than on the 7 Plus because there's now true tone colour adjustment with sensors tweaking the colour balance in various lighting conditions so as to always give accurate and pleasant colours, which all sounds like marketing hogwash, but it does work well in practice, just set and forget. The display is claimed to be both Dolby Vision and HDR10 compliant, the two HDR standards for video content. Again, managed very capably by the A11 chipset in terms of pixel level calculations in the billions of operations per second. Actual content is limited in 2017, though I have watched the demos. They're not quite as jaw-dropping here on a backlit IPS display as when the tech is on an AMOLED screen, but that's to be expected, and also why Apple went for AMOLED on the iPhone 10. The home button here is the now familiar pressure-sensitive Touch ID sensor with adjustable taptic feedback to amazingly realistically simulate the feel of a physical button. As anyone who has been through the older iPhones and into the new age will attest, the move from clunky mechanical switches to solid state takes all of a day to get used to and massively improves long-term reliability of the iPhone. No more trips to the Apple Store to get a button or switch replaced. Touch ID works so well, in fact, that it still beggars belief that Apple is abandoning it for the iPhone X. Maybe Face ID really will be just one innovative step too far. In the meantime, if you want the power of the A11 chip and the improved imaging and other benefits still to be mentioned by me, yet keeping the Touch ID fingerprint recognition, for example, for Apple Pay, then the iPhone 8 range is the one to go for and probably stick at. Down at the bottom of the iPhone 8 Plus is the usual main speaker under the right-hand grille and paired with a lesser speaker component under the earpiece grille at the top of the phone. It's an asymmetrical setup, partly because one is facing to the side and one is facing towards the user. But it absolutely works, and the stereo balance for the user is perfect. Here's a demonstration. I was also amazed at some of the bass coming from the phone. The 8 Plus is right. Thank you. Thank you. The 8 Plus is reproducing bass notes in my music videos that I've only previously heard on the speaker specialist Marshall London from 2 years ago. Astonishing. I've seen the teardowns and I can't see anything special in terms of component size. There's clearly some Apple resonant magic happening here, maybe even tuning the internal space of the phone to help with bass reflex. You can certainly feel bass frequencies through the back of the phone, so I think I'm on the right lines here. Although the essential specifications of the iPhone 8 Plus camera haven't changed from the 7 Plus, so an f/1.8 unit with OIS and an f/2.8 2x non-stabilized telephoto lens, we're assured that the sensor is new and the pixels are deeper. So there should be less crosstalk between each sensor pixel and thus less noise. But the big improvements come in terms of image processing. There's auto HDR in that every photo you take benefits from this, with the software effectively deciding on what will give best results. So you don't have to think about this ever or live with, by default, pairs of HDR and non-HDR shots anymore. In fact, one of the coolest parts of flicking through your photos is that each image is first shown without HDR, and then the HDR blend kicks in after a second. So everything suddenly becomes better. Given that the A11 chip has the power to present the blend instantaneously, I can only think that Apple deliberately left in a delay to keep that wow moment as the sky becomes bluer and the shadows suddenly show detail. In fact, it's not just HDR bracketed exposures thanks to the horsepower available. The camera application is continuously grabbing photos into RAM all the time while the camera is open and with varying parameters as long as that viewfinder is active, meaning that when you tap the shutter to take a photo, there's quite literally zero shutter lag since the photo you wanted will actually have been taken a fraction of a second before your fingertip was registered on the screen, which means that those wow action moments are far more likely to be snapped properly, and you don't have to think about predicting a subject's movement to time it properly. Very impressive, all thanks to the horsepower available under the hood. The upshot of all of this is much better photos in all light conditions. Sunny snaps have better dynamic range, zoomed shots are clearer, and so on. Apple has always done a great job of letting novices take great photos, and this is even more true now. See the samples here with my annotations. The 2x zoom lens works well in good light, though as before it gets dropped completely in low light because of the lack of stabilization. So only zoom in daylight, folks. There's another new effect, portrait lighting, with an example here. Yes, what Apple failed to mention is that it only works well with young and photogenic subjects. The effect is a bit rough, but will doubtless improve. The camera now shoots incredible video at up to 4K 60 frames per second and eats up disk space, of course, which is why Apple has made the base model for the iPhone 8 range 64 gigabytes, and this should be fine for most casual users. Slightly oddly, Apple has reduced the battery capacities for the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus compared to the 7 range, with the 8 Plus here having a 2,675 mAh cell. In fairness, this still seems to get through the day easily thanks to A11 chip efficiencies, plus the Qi Wireless charging means that the battery life simply won't be an issue if users invest just a little more in some charging pads. And note, you don't for once have to pay Apple prices for these. Generic, cheap and cheerful third-party pads will be fine. The iPhone 8 Plus comes out of the box, of course, with iOS 11, which has been covered widely across the net. In fact, iPhone users watching this will already have played with it on existing hardware. The main changes are that the, quote, cover sheet now integrates both lock screen and notifications. There's a facelift in most applications in terms of heading and layout. Control Center has been heavily revamped into something that wouldn't seem out of place on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise in Star Trek Next Generation. The App Store itself has got curated mini reviews each day. And finally, there's a Files app, though don't get too excited. It's just a way to browse and copy and paste items from various cloud drives, iCloud, OneDrive, Dropbox, etc. Oh well. I disagree with those saying this should have been called the 7S Plus. The 8 Plus here is a major upgrade. Sure, the improvements are incremental, but they're consistent across the board, from materials used, the True Tone display, from the blazing fast A11 chipset to the improved camera and effects, to the thankfully standard wireless charging, to the, to me, amazing speaker tweaks. Most of all, it's possibly the last iPhone ever to have Touch ID, and I can imagine a number of Apple iPhone fans planning to stall their ownership on the 8 range, at least for a couple of years. In exactly the same way as some iPhone owners chose to stay on the iPhone 6S and 6S Plus in order to keep that 3.5mm headphone jack as long as possible. Taking the iPhone 8 Plus on its own merit, though, Apple's typical launch claim that this is the best iPhone we've ever made is absolutely true. It impressed me at every turn. If you love iOS and want both it and maximum functionality all in one device, then look no further.